Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life as if they're in control of everything, while others feel like they're being pulled along by forces outside themselves? It almost looks like magic, as if certain individuals hold a hidden power, a secret knowledge that makes them more influential, more captivating, and somehow more in charge of their own destiny. The truth is, there's no magic. What they've tapped into is the science of mind control, not in the sinister sense you might first imagine, but in a way that blends psychology, neuroscience, and practical strategies to shape how the mind works. And here's the part that might surprise you. This science isn't reserved for secret agencies, hypnotists, or manipulative masterminds. It's something you can learn, something you can use, and when you do, your entire life can become richer, deeper, and infinitely more interesting. But let's pause here. The phrase mind control tends to trigger suspicion. It conjures images of manipulation, of someone else bending your will, of cult leaders and propaganda. And yes, those things exist and they're real, examples of how powerful these principles can be when abused. Yet there's another side, because controlling the mind isn't only about controlling others. It's about understanding the mechanisms of thought, emotion, and behavior so deeply that you begin to control yourself. Imagine being able to override procrastination, to direct your focus wherever you choose, to ignite curiosity in dull moments, and to step into social interactions with a sense of magnetic presence. That is the science we're diving into. Now let's go back to something you might already know. Your brain is essentially a prediction machine. Every day it runs simulations, predicts outcomes, and nudges you towards certain behaviors without you even realizing it. For example, when you wake up and reach for your phone before even brushing your teeth, you're not making a conscious decision every morning. Your brain has been wired by repetition and dopamine to expect that quick hit of novelty from checking notifications. The control here isn't really yours. It belongs to the systems and cues around you. If that sounds unsettling, it's because it is. A large portion of your daily actions aren't chosen, they're programmed. And once you realize that, the question becomes, who's doing the programming? Is it you or is it the world around you? Psychologists often talk about cognitive schemas, mental frameworks, that shape how we interpret the world. These schemas decide whether a challenge excites us or terrifies us, whether we notice opportunities or walk past them blindly. To make life more interesting, the first step is recognizing that these mental frameworks can be shifted, bent, and even rewritten. That's the first layer of mind control, not in the external manipulative sense, but as self-directed influence. Think of it like hacking your own operating system. Take, for instance, the concept of attention. We often believe attention is something we pay freely, but in truth, it's one of the most valuable currencies in existence. Entire industries compete for it. Social media, entertainment, advertising, even politics. If you've ever found yourself scrolling for hours, losing track of time, you've experienced what it feels like when your attention is hijacked. But what if you could turn the tables? What if you could learn to direct your attention intentionally, to control not only what you look at, but how deeply you engage with it? Suddenly, an ordinary walk becomes a playground of discovery. A conversation becomes a chance to decode hidden signals, and boredom evaporates because you've trained your mind to seek fascination. That's the science of controlling focus. And it's one of the fastest ways to make your life more interesting. And here's where things get really exciting. The brain thrives on novelty. Neuroscientists call this the novelty bias. Your mind is wired to light up when something new enters your awareness. That's why travel feels exhilarating. Why new hobbies feel addictive at first. Why even a new outfit can change your mood. But you don't always need to go on an exotic trip or make drastic changes to experience this. By reframing how you look at your daily environment, By deliberately seeking out small changes, you can trick your brain into treating ordinary life as extraordinary. Something as simple as taking a different route home, striking up a conversation with a stranger, or reading a book outside. Your usual genre can spark the same psychological rewards as big, dramatic adventures. Mind control, in this sense, is about controlling the stories you tell yourself about the things you encounter. Consider an example. Imagine you're standing in line at a coffee shop. Most people scroll on their phones, numbing the moment. But if you shift your frame and think, this is an experiment, the entire experience changes. You notice the expressions on people's faces, the rhythm of their movements, the subtle emotions behind the cashier's tone of voice. You start decoding human behavior as if you're watching a live documentary. Suddenly, waiting in line becomes interesting, not because the environment changed, but because your perspective did. That's controlled curiosity. That's a mind trained to find fascination instead of falling into autopilot. Now, one of the most overlooked aspects of making life more interesting is self-suggestion. This is where psychology overlaps with what might feel like magic. Your subconscious is constantly taking cues from the language you use with yourself. If you repeatedly say, "I'm bored," or "nothing exciting ever happens to me," your subconscious accepts that script and filters your experiences accordingly. But if you prime your mind with intentional cues, "Today, I'm going to find something fascinating," or "every person I meet has something to teach me," suddenly your brain begins scanning for those opportunities. This isn't wishful thinking. It's cognitive priming. The same technique used by athletes before competitions, by negotiators before big deals, and by performers before stepping on stage. They're not leaving their state of mind to chance. They're controlling it deliberately. Think about this. Your life is, in many ways, a collection of stories you tell yourself. Two people can go through the same event and experience it completely differently based on the internal narrative they apply. If someone cuts you off in traffic, one story is, "People are terrible and the world is against me." Another story is, "That person must be in a rush. Maybe they're late for something important." One narrative fuels anger and stress, the other fuels empathy and calm. Which version is true? Maybe neither. But the one you choose determines how interesting or miserable your life feels. That's the power of mental framing. That's the art of taking control. And once you start practicing these techniques, attention control, novelty seeking, cognitive priming, and reframing, you'll notice something remarkable. Other people respond to you differently. Humans are wired for social mirroring, which means we subconsciously reflect the emotions and energy of the people around us. When you walk into a room with curiosity, with controlled focus, with a narrative that life is interesting, people feel it. They're drawn to it. They lean into your presence because it makes their own world more interesting too. Without even trying, you become magnetic. That's how leaders inspire, how storytellers captivate, how ordinary people suddenly become unforgettable. This is where the science of mind control intersects with influence. When you master yourself, you indirectly influence others, not by manipulation, but by demonstration. You embody a mindset that others subconsciously want to adopt. You create an environment where curiosity, positivity, and engagement thrive. In that sense, you don't just make your life more interesting. You make the lives of people around you more interesting too. Let's go deeper into the idea of influence. One of the most fascinating discoveries in psychology is how much of our behavior is shaped by unconscious cues. You've probably heard of the concept of priming, where even small, seemingly irrelevant stimuli can shape decisions without people realizing it. For instance, studies have shown that when a room smells faintly of cleaning fluid, People are more likely to tidy up after themselves. When individuals see words related to old age, like retirement or Florida, they tend to walk more slowly afterward, even though they weren't told to. That's how powerful the mind is. It absorbs, imitates, and reacts beneath the surface. And if external cues can influence us so profoundly, imagine what happens when you take charge of those cues for yourself. This is where personal rituals and environments become essential. Think of your environment as a silent partner in your psychology. If your space is cluttered and chaotic, your thoughts will often mirror that chaos. If your space is inspiring, full of cues that remind you of growth, curiosity, or creativity, your mind can't help but respond. That's mind control at the environmental level. You're setting up conditions that shape your behavior automatically. Want to read more? Leave books within reach, not hidden on a shelf. Want to feel energized in the morning? Place your running shoes where you can't miss them. These may seem like small hacks, but they tap into a massive psychological truth. We're creatures of association. By controlling the cues, you control the mind. Now let's shift from environments to internal states. Have you ever noticed how your body posture can influence your mood? When you slump, your brain interprets that as fatigue or defeat, and your emotions follow. When you stand tall, shoulders back, taking up space, your brain interprets that as confidence and adjusts accordingly. Amy Cuddy's research on power poses sparked debate, but the underlying principle remains clear. Body and mind are a two-way street. By deliberately choosing your posture, gestures, even your breathing rhythm, you're not just expressing how you feel, you're controlling how you feel. This is one of the simplest but most overlooked methods to make life more interesting. Because when you prime your physiology for alertness and curiosity, suddenly you notice details you would otherwise ignore. Let's talk about conversations. Most people drift through social interactions on autopilot, sticking to surface-level questions and rehearsed responses. But if you want to unlock the true art of making life interesting, you need to reframe how you approach people. Instead of asking, "What do you do?" try asking, "What are you excited about right now?" That single shift transforms the entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're no longer collecting facts. You're opening doors into someone's passions, stories, and dreams. And here's the remarkable part. When people talk about things they love, their energy changes. They light up, and in turn, you absorb that energy. Conversations become memorable, connections deepen, and life feels richer simply because you asked a better question. That's mind control too, directing the flow of interaction in a way that brings out the best in others and in yourself. And speaking of flow, let's uncover one of the most powerful psychological states. You can enter the flow state. You've probably experienced it. Those moments when you're so immersed in an activity that time seems to vanish. Distractions fade, and your performance skyrockets. Athletes, artists, musicians, even scientists describe this as the peak of human experience. But flow doesn't happen by accident. It follows a formula. You need just the right balance of challenge and skill. Too easy and you get bored. Too hard and you get anxious. The sweet spot is when your skills are stretched just enough to keep you engaged. By deliberately seeking these conditions, by setting goals that stretch you but don't overwhelm you, you can engineer flow states more often. Imagine living in a rhythm where even work feels like play, where the boundaries between effort and enjoyment blur. That's one of the ultimate ways to make life more interesting, by mastering the art of flow. Now, let's dig into something deeper. Beliefs. Psychologists have long studied the concept of self-fulfilling prophecies. When you believe something strongly enough, you unconsciously behave in ways that make it true. If you believe you're unlucky, you'll overlook opportunities and remember only the setbacks, reinforcing the belief. If you believe you're capable, you'll try more, persist longer, and eventually succeed, proving yourself right. This is why mind control starts at the level of belief. If you want a life filled with interest, you must begin with the belief that life is inherently interesting, that every person, every place, every experience carries hidden layers waiting to be uncovered. When that belief takes root, your brain filters reality to confirm it. Suddenly, you're not waiting for life to entertain. You're finding entertainment in life itself. But here's a question worth asking. Why do some people seem to fall into these habits naturally, while others struggle? Part of the answer lies in their internal dialogue. You might not realize it, but you're constantly talking to yourself, narrating, judging, interpreting. That inner voice can be your greatest ally or your worst enemy. If your inner dialogue is filled with criticism, doubt, and negativity, your perception of life narrows. If it's filled with encouragement, curiosity, and possibility, your perception expands. This is why many psychologists recommend practices like journaling or affirmations, not because of the words themselves, but because they retrain the inner voice. Over time, you're programming your subconscious with a new script, one that makes you resilient, creative, and open to wonder. That's not fluffy motivation. It's rewiring the brain's language patterns. Let's tie this back to making life more interesting. Think of a child exploring the world for the first time. Everything is fascinating. The texture of a leaf, the taste of a new food, the sound of a bird. That's because their brains haven't yet been dulled by routine or filtered by rigid beliefs. But as adults, we often lose that sense of wonder. The key is not to go back to childhood, but to relearn the skill of intentional curiosity. When you control your attention, your environment, your posture, your dialogue, and your beliefs, you reignite that childlike fascination in an adult's world. And suddenly, even the smallest experiences feel rich. This is where the science of mind control intersects with meaning. Because at the heart of all these practices lies a simple truth. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your focus. If you focus on problems, life feels heavy. If you focus on possibilities, life feels light. If you focus on what's boring, life feels dull. If you focus on what's fascinating, life feels extraordinary. Control your focus and you control your reality. And when you control your reality, you step into the driver's seat of your own story.